there, friends. Thank you for tuning into my channel. Today I'm going to be making a nativity wreath. So I'm starting off with the nativity. You guys may have seen this wood cutout before. It's from Hobby Lobby from their Christmas section. So I painted it in that faux cart warm white color that I showed at the beginning. And I gave it 2 coats. Now I'm just going in with Folk Art Sahara Gold. They're both just regular acrylic paint. And I'm going in with this little sponge dauber and just, I keep it pretty dry. I dab the dauber into the paint and then I sort of unload it just to keep the sponge mainly dry, and then when I dab it onto my surface I just do the edges and it just gives it like a nice feathered look. So I just did that around the edges. Now you see me here, I'm going into the back of the cutout and I cut out little pieces of popsicle stick. I added some wood glue and I'm just adding those tiny little pieces of wood to the back. And that is where I'm going to staple in some zip ties. And I'll use those zip ties to attach to the wreath. And I'm just adding in those pieces of popsicle stick just to give me a little bit of space to ensure that my staple doesn't go through. Now it shouldn't because this cutout is pretty thick, but I'm just trying to be extra careful, just extra, I guess. And I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't damage the front side of my cover, of my cutout. Now I've attached the zip ties to the nativity. Now I'm just going in and attaching it to the wreath, to the grapevine wreath. So what I'm showing here is some like fishing line, kind of like nylon thread. And for some reason I was editing the video and I cut out what I actually did. So since the nativity was only attached at those 2 bottom points, it really needed a 3rd point to be steady. So the star on the nativity has a hole. So I threaded that fishing line through the hole and I tied it to the grapevine. And the line is like doubled and I tied it in 2 spots, so it's pretty secure on there. Now I just took these little fairy lights and I zip tied the little battery pack to the grapevine. So this is the back of the wreath. I had turned it around and I'm weaving in the lights through, and it was a pretty short extension of lights. It's, I think, maybe like 10 feet. So I believe I only wrapped it around like maybe 1.5 or 2 times. And I mainly focused on the middle of the wreath, just focusing on the nativity, the star of the whole piece. And I think it gave a really nice effect to the wreath, and focusing on the real reason for the Christmas season, right? The birth of Jesus. So I just wanted to highlight that. So now I'm showing you some floral wire. It's a covered wire, so it looks very similar to grapevine, or I should say it blends in really well. So I cut about a 20-inch piece or so. I bend it into a U. Then the loose ends of the U I push through the grapevine. And I'm just seeing here if it's a good placement. So I failed to tell you that what I'm doing is I'm making a hanger for the wreath. I find it just easier if I make a hanger, then people will know, exactly how to hang the wreath, and it's just easier to use a hanger than to try to use the actual grapevine wreath to hang from. So I pushed the two loose ends of that U through the grapevine, and then I bend the U upward, so now it looks like a rainbow. And then the two loose ends I will twist around the U just to reinforce it. And here I'm using some pliers just to twist it the way I want. And here I'm just making sure it's got a good hold and it's a good placement. So now I'm going to add the first greenery. So it's just a long needle pine. And I know you can't really see what I'm doing here, but I'm using a hot glue gun. I use Gorilla Glue sticks, and I just add glue to the end of that pick, and I poke it in through the grapevine. Now, sometimes if I feel like the pick is a little bit too long, maybe a little bit too heavy, then I will also use a zip tie to secure it to the grapevine. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going in with a zip tie, I'm poking it through the grapevine, and I'm finding a kind of a good placement for it. And I want to make sure that none of those pine needles get bent up or too smashed. So I'm just kind of working the zip tie through so I can secure it. So here, as you can see, I've gone around most of the wreath with that long needle pine, and I'm just adding some to the very top of the wreath there just to fill it in. And I had made a bow for the wreath, and the way I secure my bow, when I tie off the bow, I use a floral wire, and that same floral wire I will attach to the wreath. So I'm just working that floral wire through the grapevine. I want it to come out the back. So it's going to be two loose ends coming through the back of the grapevine, and then I'll just twist those together to secure it to the wreath. So here I'm just twisting those wires, making sure that the bow is in a nice place where I want it. And one of the reasons I like to use floral wire is because you can still bend the wire just to get the bow exactly how you want it looking, how you want. So I know a lot of people will use like a zip tie to secure their bow to the wreath, but with a zip tie you can't really adjust your bow once it's zip tied to the wreath, if that makes any sense. Like, you can't bend that zip tie. If you need to adjust it, or if your bow is crooked, then that's why I don't really, it's not my personal preference, I should say, to use a zip tie. Once I have my bow all secured, then I fluff it, make sure everything is looking nice. Of course, throughout the process of making the wreath, the bow's going to get smashed, it's going to get moved around, but I just like to fluff it at each stage and just make sure everything's looking nice. So for this particular bow, I used two 1.5-inch ribbons, and now they're all wired, and I used one ribbon that I think was like 5/8 of an inch wide. Here I'm going in with some flocked, I think it's pine. It's just I had one bush of it, so I didn't have too much to work with. So the whole time I'm adding this greenery, I'm kind of being very selective where I put it. I just want to make sure that it's evenly dispersed throughout the wreath. So here I am again, just adding it to the top of the bow. You want to make sure that the bow really feels like incorporated into the design of the wreath. So you want to just make sure it's nicely surrounded by most of the elements that you're putting into the wreath. You don't want it just a bow sitting there on top and not really being incorporated. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting some floral wire. I want to add a pine cone to the top there. So with that floral wire, I'm going to, at first, what I do is I'm going to make a pick. So I wrap that floral wire around the bottom of the cone. And then I twist the floral wire kind of to make a pick. And as I go along, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to attach it to the wreath. So at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to just make a pick, and then I'm just going to add hot glue to the end of that pick and stick it into the grapevine. So what I actually end up doing is instead of using it as a pick, I just wrapped the floral wire around that the short flocked pine and just attached it that way. It was just a much better placement in the wreath to do it that way. Here I'm just adding more of that flocked pine, just adding the hot glue and gluing it into the grapevine. So I've worked my way through the grapevine with that flocked pine. Now I'm adding some eucalyptus leaves in a beige color. These came from what I'll just call a beige bush, and that bush had different elements in it that were beige. So I thought that would be a perfect piece to add to the wreath with the beige nativity and the beige bow. And I was just very careful how and where I placed some of the elements. I wanted to just have a nice balance of beige throughout the wreath. So I just kind of dry fit a lot of things, kind of like place the elements in without the hot glue first. And then if I like it, then I would go ahead and glue it in. Here I'm just pointing out that there's a lot of space here that's not covered. There's a lot of exposed grapevine that needs to be filled in. So I'm using some cedar to add into all those spaces. I like the look of that cedar because it's very airy, very light, and I just like the kind of the wispiness of it. And here I'm also just seeing if I could add some of that beige to that area. What I'm pointing out here is the fact that the nativity really looks like it's floating right there. There's nothing filled in there to kind of soften that wood cutout. So I'm going in with some of that long needle pine that I used at the beginning, and I'm just gluing that in. And these pieces are much shorter, so I really don't have to use a zip tie to secure it. The hot glue is strong enough to hold that, at least in my opinion. So I'm just going in, poking in the pine, and that kind of covers that sort of hard edge of that wood cutout, and then it doesn't seem like the Holy Family is just floating. So now I'm going to show you a little trick. This cardboard tube comes from a mesh, like deco mesh, and it's a very sturdy tube. So what I do is, if I want to curl my ribbon, I'll just wrap the ribbon around the tube and it gives a really nice curl. And since the ribbon is wired, it'll hold nicely. So here I'm just filling in some more with that beige bush, or elements of that beige bush. It was just a mixed bush of beige leaves. So I'm just going in, and here is the wreath. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something new. Please tell me in the comments what you think of this nativity wreath, and I would love if you subscribe to my channel. I will be posting more tutorials, and I do have shorts of all the projects I finish. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.